Back in 2017, I had moved to a smaller town in rural Illinois, and I only knew one person in town. I'm a bit of an introvert, so I had a hard time making friends, especially being single and in my early 20s living in a town filled with a population that was mostly retired. My friend, who I'll call Clara, introduced me to an older couple that were maybe in their early 50s and were looking for a dog sitter. She thought it would be a good way for me to make some connections while living there. We had made time to meet at their house so I could see the lay of the land and meet the dogs. The home was a 70s brick ranch style, severely outdated and slightly falling apart in some places. I explored abandoned houses for fun, so I didn't mind. The dogs were sweet, but as for the couple, they were odd. They were friendly enough, but while I'd be speaking to them, instead of making eye contact, they'd be doing more of a full body scan as if sizing me up. They would also guide me to rooms and not really say anything on the tour, just open the doors and let me look and then close them. I should also mention they sell firearms out of their home as a side business, which I didn't really mind, but they had cameras everywhere. Outside and in, hallways, living room, kitchen, office, garage, backyard, driveway, kitchen table, etc. They told me it was just for insurance purposes due to their business. It made me a little uncomfortable, but I was just really hoping to make some sort of connection in this town and some money. Then the time came for me to come and watch the dogs. They'd been gone for a week and I'd been working from home, so I made myself comfortable. I set up my workspace in their office, which had a monitor that had cameras outside displayed so I could see all around the house, which was kind of nice because I felt a little at ease being alone on a decent-sized property in the middle of nowhere. I should also note, the dogs had a doggy door so they could go outside 24/7, and the house backed up to the woods. First night was fine. Second night, I noticed one of the cameras went offline that watched the driveway. I didn't think much of it, as Wi-Fi out in rural areas is finicky, but I still went and checked just in case maybe the camera fell or something. As I walked to the door, I heard the dogs get off the ground and scramble frantically to run out the doggy door and start barking like crazy. Mind you, it's about 10 at night, so I got freaked out and wanted to get the dogs to come back inside. So I made my way to the back door and noticed the dogs were both barking like crazy at the same spot at the part of the fence that backs up to the woods. I didn't see anything, but I'd seen enough horror movies to where I was starting to psych myself out and I had to find a way to calm down and get the dogs in. So treats it was. I got them back in and blocked off the doggy door with a chair that weighed a decent amount and called it a night. Next morning, I woke up late and threw myself off and had to start working before I could feed the dogs. But then I noticed they weren't at the front of the bed anymore. The house was quiet. I got up and called their names and they didn't respond. So I walked to the back door and they were in the yard just doing their thing. Then it hit me. How did they get outside when I blocked the door? My heart sank and I felt all the blood rush from my head as I turned to my right to see the chair that I had pushed in front of the doggy door now was sitting in the corner of the room. Panic set in immediately, and I called my friend Clara to explain the situation and that I needed her to come here ASAP to do a walkthrough of the house with me because I just knew there was no way the dogs could move that chair 5+ feet. She came over about 20 minutes later, and I made a beeline for the front door and let her in. We both went room by room and couldn't find anything or anyone. It just didn't make any sense. She tried to reassure me that maybe I didn't have it pushed over as much as I thought I did. I figured I'd just accept it for what it was and just push through on overly high alert for the next 4 days. Clara left and I went back to work. The day was fine and quiet, and I began to relax again. I finished making dinner and decided to get some work done. I sat down in the office and just happened to turn to look at the monitor with the camera views on it and noticed all of them were offline. My stomach dropped. I knew one going out was possible, but all 4? That was just too coincidental. Due to the nature of the business the couple ran, I texted them to let them know their cameras were down and if they wanted me to try and troubleshoot it for them, I'd be happy to. Also because I didn't like not having eyes on the outside of this place. A couple hours went by and no response. They're on vacation after all, so I just figured I'd have to let it go and suck it up until they get back to me. It was late, close to midnight, when I finally settled in and was watching TV to fill the void of silence that surrounded me when I heard the dogs get up and scramble to the doggy door again. I shot up and out of bed, my heart pounding out of my chest because I knew something was wrong. I grabbed the knife I had sitting next to the bed and walked to the back door looking out into the yard and couldn't see anything. The dogs had already stopped barking and were now just sniffing along the fence. I did that whisper yell to get them to come back in when I heard a thump come from the other side of the house. Frozen, I had to make a decision fast. Try to get the dogs in, or investigate whatever the hell just fell. I got the dogs in just in case it was some animal they were after. I didn't want them to get skunk sprayed or something. They wandered into the living room and hopped on the couches, and I slid the chair back in front of the door. I took a picture with my phone this time just so I could reassure myself I did it. I made my way to the back room where I heard the thump noise, and I immediately froze. I'm not sure if anyone else can understand, but when there's a presence in the room, there's almost this small difference in the atmosphere. There's a white noise, not breathing or movement, just a break in the stagnance of the silence. Well, regardless if you don't, I felt it. I wasn't going to be that person that kept seeking out the exact area of where this was coming from. So I asked, "Who's there? What are you doing here?" Silence. I then called out the names of the couple that lived there to see if for some wild reason they were in their own home at midnight when they weren't supposed to be, but again met with silence. Clara has a kid and husband, so I didn't want to bother her, so I figured the next thing I would do was call the police. But then I felt that wash of embarrassment in case it was nothing. They'd think I'm an idiot. I stepped back into the hallway that led to the room and slowly closed the door as quiet as possible and locked the door. I went and sat in the living room with the dogs with my phone in one hand and knife in the other. I couldn't make a decision on what to do. About 20 minutes went by and I received a text from the wife saying, "Hi, don't worry about the cameras, you're safe." I was thrown off because they were in Florida and it was almost 2 in the morning there. And also, what do you mean I'm safe? I didn't even mention safety being the issue. I was getting ready to give a general sounds good text when I got another text from the wife. It read, "Also, can you make sure that I didn't leave the garage door open to the inside? I don't want anything getting in. The door she's mentioning is in that back room." I didn't want to go back in there for obvious reasons, so I just didn't respond and pretended like I was asleep and couldn't. 2 minutes later, she texted again, "Hi, I know it's late, but can you please check on this for me, as I'm worried." My gut was screaming no, but maybe the noise was a wild animal that got in. I didn't respond, but got up to go check, knife and phone in hand still. As I approached the door, I heard a shuffle from the back room. I stopped and stood there silent to see if I heard anything else before I opened the door. My phone lit up and she texted me, "I see you're up, can you please go in and check?" I couldn't move. I forgot they had cameras in the hallway and in the living room. Why were they pushing this at 1 in the morning? Now knowing I was being watched, reluctantly, I slowly unlocked the door and opened it with my arms stretched as far as I could to get an open view of the room from as far as possible. I didn't hear anything or see anything, so I took a couple steps into the room and saw the door to the garage was in fact open. It was so damn dark in there, I didn't want to get any closer, but I had to do it and just get this over with. I approached the door, and a light appeared from my phone as I had gotten a notification, and the faint light from my phone lit a portion of the garage doorway I was about 2 steps from, when I noticed the outline of an arm pressed against the wall right next to the door. Fight or flight kicked in immediately. I turned and ran back through the doorway and slammed the door to the back room shut and locked it. I grabbed my keys off the kitchen counter and ran out the front door. I fumbled with the keys as I was shaking and panting, and I got the door unlocked when I noticed the garage door was opening and halfway up. I started my car, and as the headlights lit up the now open garage, I saw in the back corner a grown man in a jacket squatting behind a box right next to the door I was going to close. I didn't waste time and floored it in reverse down the driveway and drove immediately to the police station. I was crying and explained what happened, and they said they'd send a unit to check out the house. I sat in my car at the police station texting the wife about what just happened, seeing as they had access to the cameras and could maybe see if someone was in there. No response. About a half hour later, the police officer came back to the station and let me know the garage door was open, but the house was clear and there was no signs of a break-in. They even checked around the perimeter of the yard and nothing was out of the ordinary. They knew I was scared out of my mind, so they offered to follow me back and do another check with me there. After it was done and I saw with my own eyes no one was there, they left. I couldn't sleep. It was going on almost 3 or 4 in the morning at this point, so I just laid on the couch by the dogs, wide awake, gripping the kitchen knife. About 20 minutes after the officer left, I got a text from the wife. "Hi, plans changed. We'll be home soon. You can go home now." The complete disregard for the situation that just unfolded that I texted her about. The letting me know you're coming home 4 days early and didn't mention it, and will be here just hours after all of this? I didn't dwell on the moment. I grabbed my stuff and left. Their home is on a rural road, but only about a quarter mile from the main street. As I got halfway to the stop sign and looked in my rearview mirror, I saw a car with no headlights on pull into their driveway. I texted the wife and said, "Someone just pulled into your driveway as I was leaving." Almost instantly, I got a text back that read, "I know." Chills ran down my spine. They were setting me up. They'd been in the area that whole time. The dogs barking in the middle of the night were probably alerting me that they had been driving on the path behind the house. They shut the cameras off so I couldn't see their creeping movements on the property while I was right there inside, oblivious. I never heard from them again. My friend profusely apologized, saying she had no idea how weird they were and that she'd only known them as coming into the local diner every now and then. She said after that incident they never came in again. I'm 30 now, and I still have trouble with the entire situation. I know I'm okay and I'm safe, but knowing I was just seconds away from God knows what is a feeling I can't seem to shake, and not sure if I ever will be able to. I work as a bartender at a bar and restaurant in a suburb just outside Baltimore. I'll do my best to explain the layout so the story makes sense. It's a busy place with a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me and the cooks in the back. If you want to find food or non-alcoholic drinks, you have to order them at the bar, and when everything's ready, you grab it from the counter. I'm not sure why things are done that way, but I guess it had something to do with management being cheap and trying to avoid hiring waiters. Either way, it keeps things fast-paced, which I actually like. For whatever reason, the place is really popular, even though I personally don't think it's anything super special. The atmosphere is lively most nights, with great music, a buzzing crowd, and a standing area near the DJ booth where people gather to dance and chat. The constant flow of customers and the high-energy vibe make the job fly by. I love meeting and talking to new people, so the gig is perfect for me. I would probably lose my mind if I had to wait long periods of time between serving guests, but that's just me. I bet some people are the opposite. That particular night started off like any other. It was a weekend, so things were going to be super busy. I was ready. After a certain time, the bar started filling up with people. It looked like more of a younger college crowd that night, which meant more dancing, more spilling, and a rowdier environment in general. Oh yeah, and worse tips, which kind of sucked for me. This one group of kids just kept on ordering round after round of tequila shots faster than I could line up the salt and limes. It's always chaos when they take over the bar. One of them was so plastered he used the same pickup line on me like 3 times. I was running around doing my thing when I noticed an elderly couple walk in and sit down at the booth in the corner of the restaurant. At first glance, there was nothing strange about them. I just thought it was interesting that 2 people that age would want to come into a rowdy place like this. I didn't have too much time to think about it though, so I went back to work. Fast forward maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I was halfway through pouring a line of gin and tonics when I noticed the couple again. My hands kept working, muscle memory taking over, but my brain was stuck on them for some reason. That's when it hit me. They were just sitting there motionlessly. They hadn't ordered anything either. No food and definitely not any drinks I would have remembered. I looked a little closer and realized that they weren't even looking at each other. They were both fixated at the wall next to them. From what I could tell, it didn't look like they were talking either. It was the strangest thing. I was beyond curious, but the bar was slammed, and I had too much to do to spend time wondering about it. I figured they might be waiting for someone or didn't realize how the place worked. Maybe they were waiting for a waiter to take their order. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them myself. I walked over to the table and put on my most polite smile. As I approached, neither of them turned to face me. They were both still staring at the wall like statues. I cleared my throat and asked them if they wanted anything to eat or drink. The woman didn't even flinch. She kept staring at the wall like I hadn't spoken at all. The man turned his head slowly, like he was moving in slow motion. When his face came into view, I felt a chill run through me. His skin was pale and wrinkled, and his eyes were almost sunken into his face completely. He didn't speak, just stared at me and shook his head once, firmly but silently. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I muttered something in response and quickly returned to the bar. I had the weirdest feeling in my gut after that. Those people looked like they didn't even belong in this century, let alone this bar. I didn't look over at that booth for a long time. Eventually, things started to die down a little, and I remembered the couple. I glanced over impulsively, and I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. Both of them were staring directly at me now. I made direct eye contact with the woman, but she never averted her gaze. I don't think I'd ever been more uncomfortable at my job than I was in that moment. I looked away and pretended to be busy, trying not to freak out completely. By the time I glanced back again, the booth was empty. I was relieved. I was just glad that they were gone, as mean as that sounds. By the end of the night, I was still thinking about the whole thing. As I wiped down the bar and closed up with my coworker Karen, I decided to ask her if she saw anything strange. She's, I guess, what you would call a vet. She's been working there for years and prides herself on noticing everything and everyone that comes through the doors. When I asked her about the couple, she gave me a confused look and said she didn't know what I was talking about. I looked at her blankly and told her I was talking about the elderly couple that was sitting in the corner booth. She shook her head and told me she didn't remember seeing anyone like that. She then jokingly asked me if I was hallucinating, which got a playful laugh out of me, but on the inside though, I was losing it. I knew what I had seen. I asked her if she was sure, and she crossed her arms before listing at least 10 random people who had ordered food that night and what they were wearing. I laughed again and complimented her memory, but like I said before, I was dying on the inside. By the time we locked up, I started doubting myself. As I walked to my car, I noticed something that made me nearly drop my keys in fear. Across the street, there were 2 dark figures standing under a lone streetlight. I knew it was them. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I didn't wait another second. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without another look. The drive home was awful. I was trying not to break down the whole time. I just kept repeating, "Oh my God," over and over. I had so many questions. Had Karen somehow missed them? Were those people even real? Was I going insane? I couldn't explain it. I thought I was going crazy. I wish this story had a resolved ending, but it doesn't. I never saw those people again. I never got any kind of explanation. I don't think I ever will. I apologize in advance if I mess up any details about the story I'm about to tell. This is something that my best friend told me multiple times several years ago now. It's one of those stories so unsettling you can't shake it even after hearing it more than once. My friend's dad was a logger, specifically a tree saw operator. For those who don't know, a tree saw is a massive machine capable of cutting down giant trees and slicing them to specific lengths. His job meant long, grueling hours, often alone in the deep, secluded forests of the Pacific Northwest. The way his logging crew worked, he was paid based on the number of trees he cut down rather than the hours he worked, so he would often push himself to work 16 to 20-hour days to finish jobs as quickly as possible. After he and his coworker finished their part, the rest of the crew would come in to clear the felled trees and transport them to the mill. While he spent about half of his time working alone, the other half was spent with his friend Griffin, another tree saw operator. They used radios to communicate, especially when they worked on opposite ends of the same job site. A number of years ago, my friend's dad and Griffin were assigned to a remote job site high up on a mountain. It took the company over 3 weeks just to clear a road wide enough for their trucks and equipment to make it to the site. By the time they began work, they were positioned in an extremely desolate part of the mountain. They were already 10 days in, making good progress, when they started hearing strange chatter over their radios. At first, the voices were muffled, just faint, static-laden murmurs that didn't make sense. They tried switching channels, but no matter what they did, the chatter followed them. Anyone who's used a standard radio knows how strange that is. It should be impossible for anyone to follow you when you're switching channels. As they progressed farther up the mountain, the voices became more distinct. They couldn't hear full conversations, but based on what they could hear, they both agreed that the tone of the conversation fragments felt off. My friend's dad said it sounded almost casual at times, but the content was unintelligible. They also started finding strange signs that people had been there before them. Random containers, footprints in the dirt, and small makeshift campsites. Like I said before, they were in a place so remote it was practically inaccessible, so these discoveries were deeply unsettling. No one should have been up there. One day, Griffin came across a tent hidden just off a trail and called my friend's dad over. They decided to investigate. Inside, they found a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag filled with the most disturbing things imaginable. Multiple pairs of children's underwear, duct tape, rope, and crude sketches of children being molested. There were even photos of a fresh apple indicating whoever owned it had been there recently. Griffin wanted to pack up and leave immediately. My friend's dad, ever the workaholic, insisted they finish the job. They agreed to limit radio communication to emergencies only and decided to keep working. That night, they sat in the camper, unable to shake the dread that hung over them. The radio crackled to life again, and this time, they could make out snippets of a conversation between two men. They were talking about mundane things, collecting water and firewood, but the realization that these men were likely connected to the tent freaked my friend's dad out. Griffin wasn't as fazed, but my friend's dad was losing it. The next night, my friend's dad decided to confront them. When he heard the men talking about gathering bush for a fire, he grabbed the radio and demanded to know who they were and what they were doing there. The radio went silent immediately, and the men didn't respond. That silence was almost more unnerving than the chatter. Griffin was upset that my friend's dad had announced their presence, and the two of them got into a brief argument before deciding they'd escalate the situation the next day. Around midnight, Griffin shook my friend's dad awake, whispering that someone was outside the camper. The first thing he noticed was the soft sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Heart pounding, he fumbled for his gun, only to realize it wasn't loaded. He had no idea where his ammunition was. Griffin was unarmed, and the idea of calling the police was laughable given their location. They both sat frozen as they heard the camper door handle jiggle. The door creaked open, but didn't fully swing inward. Their camper was high off the ground, and there was no ladder or stool to climb up. Then came the scratching. Long, deliberate scratches along the outside of the door. 4 agonizing minutes passed. Finally, my friend's dad nodded at Griffin, signaling he was going to check it out. He moved quietly toward the door, gripping a flashlight in his shaking hand. Just as he reached the door, it burst open, and he was struck across the face with a knife. His pain was blinding. He fell out of the camper, hitting the ground hard. Before he could recover, a man was on top of him, pressing the knife against his neck. Another man appeared, kicking him repeatedly in the head. Griffin, without hesitation, leapt out of the camper and tackled the man with a knife. The second man bolted into the darkness, and the one Griffin had tackled scrambled to his feet and followed. They disappeared into the forest. Griffin helped my dad's friend back into the truck, and they drove 2 hours to the nearest hospital. It was bad. His face was a bloody mess, and there was a cut across his eye so severe it permanently damaged his vision. They reported the attack to the police, but nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, as the rest of the logging crew finished the job, one of their coworkers was found bound, gagged, raped, and murdered in a ditch. No arrests were ever made. To this day, my friend's dad struggles with PTSD. His right eye, with its disfigured pupil, constantly reminds him of that night. I'm sure he hasn't had a full night of restful sleep since. I've been terrified of deep woods for a long time now, mostly because of my friend's dad's experience. I haven't heard from my friend or his dad in years now, so I can only hope he's doing all right.